Since the time that Boris went to Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital, and was walking around with the President, Zelensky, without a flak jacket, the number 10 team have been looking for a way to increase on that and market Boris Johnson and his relationship with Zelensky, as you said, and indeed the Ukrainian people. And this is the next thing on the list. So he's found a way to announce this extra aid, 300 million, plus what has also been given beforehand as well. And this is another thorn in the side of the Kremlin and Moscow, and it's an attempt to try and push Putin against the ropes once again.
Is that a bit of a dangerous game for us to be getting involved in, do you think, that given the kind of rhetoric that we've been hearing from Putin and also on his propaganda news channels saying that they could annihilate Britain very, very easily? I mean, the more aid we give, the more of a threat we are to the Kremlin.
Exactly. It's all dangerous. Everything is dangerous at this point. So you have to make the decision as to whether you wish to stay out of the arena as such and close your doors and close your windows, or whether you decide to take a stance against this aggression because, of course, Ukraine is an independent country since 1991. And the feeling is that since he got away with Crimea in 2014, that he has this urge to expand the Russian Federation. This is no secret. He said this before. He's also said that the greatest downfall for the Russian people was the fall of the Soviet Union. And he's always looked at a way of expanding this. This is an opportune time, and if you allow him to continue to expand without any say whatsoever, then of course he's going to do exactly that.
So it's going to be a pre-recorded message that's played into Parliament, I believe, for security reasons, but I suppose anyone who has any doubts about it all needs to just look at what's been happening in Mariupol, those first evacuations having to be delayed because the shelling of the steelworks there has resumed.
Absolutely shocking. People are asking why were the civilians still left over there? Well, in some cases, they weren't able to go anywhere, so it was decided that they could stay there in those underground tunnels. Of course, we know those underground tunnels to be, at the time of the Soviet Union, perhaps a nuclear bunker is what has also been suggested, but certainly dozens and dozens, perhaps even 300 or 400 of those tunnels, very safe down there. But the injuries that I've been told as well, I mean, some of the soldiers who've lost limbs, who don't have the right medicine and who don't have the right care, of course. The Russians are looking very carefully just to make sure that anyone who comes out are not a fighter, and that could have been a woman, it could have been a man, it could have been obviously a child as well. They want to make sure, and that's the reason why it stopped again after this, the first 100 people that managed to get out. So I think we're perhaps looking at some really disastrous scenes, and there's people who are stuck in.
It's not very many people, is it, when you think of the thousands that are thought to be trapped in there? I want to ask your opinion about what was being said by the Russian Foreign Minister yesterday, Sergei Lavrov. These bizarre comments about Hitler having Jewish blood, and it's been condemned overnight by Israel. What's Zelensky been saying about it all, President Zelensky?
Well, he hasn't said anything as well, but they are, you're absolutely right. They're not just bizarre, they're dangerous, they're delusional, and Israel's had to play a very tough spot because it's done a bit of a dancing act. It's playing in both fields at this point because the Russians are in Syria. They hold 2/3 of Syria. It's on Israel's northern border. And at the same time, the Russian foreign minister, as you said, Lavrov, he has made this bizarre statement, delusional, dangerous statement, to compare, well, actually, he's actually said that Hitler had Jewish blood. I mean, it's actually hard for me to say why he would come out with something like this. And the Israelis have been very, very careful with their language and tried to be very fair. They've taken in 16,000 Ukrainian people. They've given an incredible amount of aid. They've also set up, it was the first country and the only country, to the best of my knowledge, setting up a field hospital over there. But yesterday, the Prime Minister Bennett and also the Foreign Minister Yair Lapid came out in pretty much condemnation. The Russian ambassador to Jerusalem was summoned to the Foreign Minister to explain those. We'll have to see whether the Russians actually decide to take that sentence back. I doubt it very much, but unfortunately now you're starting to see a little bit of what's the word? A breakup of the relationship now between Israel and Russia because of these statements. And when you Go ahead.
Sorry, James. I was I was just going to say, you were talking about that relationship. We haven't talked about the American relationship, and Joe Biden now very keen to be seen like Boris Johnson on the ground in Kyiv.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see who's leading.
Yeah.
It's Boris. It's Boris who's leading. Boris was the first one there. Of course, his people wanted to make sure that he was the first person over there. Then the Americans came over. Are we going to see Joe Biden there? We'll have to see. But Boris, I think, is quite happy that he is the one who is seen as the leader of the world, and his voice against Putin, and saying that we will back the Ukrainians. Eventually, we will give you enough arms in order so you can make the offensive against the Russians. Firstly, to take care of your cities. This is what the talk is all about today, the address to the parliament in Kyiv, that normal life, to the best of its ability, will resume in Ukraine, certainly in the capitals, in the north and the centre, whilst the war is continuing in the south and in the east, the Donbas region. And then eventually it's Boris, and he said this out loud, it's Boris's intention that the British will back, metaphorically of course, and with arms and with as much aid as possible, will back the Ukrainian offensive against the Russians to kick every Russian out of Ukraine. I think we're looking, that's very long term, and this could be going on for a long time.
But, what do you think of the circus that's involved whenever the president goes anywhere? I mean, even a trip, you've seen that first.
I've been part of it.
You've been tackled by some of those
for
guys.
days before, how they scan and go down drains and whatever it is. I just cannot imagine them allowing the President of the United States in a war zone.
Well, exactly, not least when Antonio Guterres just the other day was visiting Kyiv, and quite deliberately the Russians decided to send a warning shot or two towards the capital just to remind them what they were capable of. It's not without risk, is it?
No, it's not. I mean, you see the usual social media against Boris when he was walking around to say it was all staged because all the buildings appeared to be intact, and he was walking around without a flak jacket. Of course they are. You get the usual rubbish on social media. It seems to be growing.
But there is a point here, James. I mean, the difficulty is that Boris, people who can see through him will see a Winston Churchill tribute act going on here.
Yes.
It is an awful situation. It's terrible. But likewise, who are you fooling, Boris, really? I mean, is there not a situation where he can turn people against it? Because he knows he's written books on Churchill. Churchill's his big hero. And he's invoking the spirit of Churchill, isn't he, for all of this?
I think to a certain degree, yes. But nevertheless, when you become Prime Minister or President or head of a country, you never really know what to expect. Anything can unfold. This obviously wasn't planned. Nobody really expected the Russians to go into Ukraine in the way that they did. There was the possibility, and I kept talking about it since the end of last year, possibility in the Donbas region where there is Russian support, but not to take the entire country a couple of days after you said that there was no way it was going to take place. And therefore, the reaction from the West, including specifically Boris, and Boris is in a position to be able to do it much more so than the Germans, because, of course, the Germans and other Europeans have to rely on the energy, on the oil that's coming from Russia. Of course, the Germans have actually gone a long way, and they've taken out some of their companies. A lot of corporations have come out. And this is also something else, because the Russians are now open to a lot of cyber attacks, because their people who worked in those who were protecting Russia have now been pulled out of the country as well. So Russia is actually in a very vulnerable spot. And there is talk at the moment, because of these sanctions, that Russia and the Russian people are going to start to feel the effects in a real serious way in the coming months. And it will go back to the Soviet days, where you'll be lining up in those socialist times. And the aristocracy in Russia is really going to be hit very badly. They don't know what's coming their way.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.